Hey everyone, today I'm going to tell you about one of the biggest and most dramatic wars of the Middle Ages. It's called the Polish-Lithuanian Teutonic War, or sometimes the Great Teutonic War. This war took place between 1409 and 1411, and it was a massive struggle that changed the balance of power in Central Europe. On one side stood the Teutonic Knights, a group of warrior monks who were as much religious as they were military. On the other side stood the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, who had recently joined together under one ruler. The spark that lit the fire came from a region called Samogitia, where the people rose up against Teutonic rule. The Knights reacted quickly and invaded Poland in August 1409. But both sides knew they weren't ready for a drawn-out war, so a king named Wenceslaus IV of Bohemia stepped in and arranged a truce that lasted 9 months. When the truce ended in June 1410, everything erupted into open conflict. The Teutonic Knights now had to face the combined forces of Poland and Lithuania. The most famous moment of this war was the Battle of Grunwald, one of the biggest battles of the entire medieval period. The Polish and Lithuanian armies came together, fought with determination, and completely defeated the Knights, killing or capturing many of their leaders. Even though the Knights suffered a terrible loss, they managed to hold on to their strong fortress at Marienburg, which kept them from being totally wiped out. When the peace treaty was finally signed in 1411, known as the Peace of Thorn, the Knights lost only a little land. But even though the map didn't change much, arguments about borders continued until 1422, when another treaty, the Peace of Melno, settled things for a while. What really mattered wasn't the small pieces of territory, but the damage done to the Teutonic Order. The Knights had to pay massive amounts of money as punishment, and those payments crushed their finances. They never fully recovered. Their state fell into money problems, their people grew angry over heavy taxes, and their once powerful army started to shrink. Meanwhile, Poland and Lithuania grew stronger and more respected, slowly becoming the leading powers in the region. To understand why this war even happened, we need to rewind back a couple of centuries. The Teutonic Knights began as a crusading order during the time of the Crusades. In the early 1200s, they moved into Komarland, a part of what is today northern Poland. Conrad I, a local ruler, asked them to help fight the Prussians, who were still pagan at the time. With the blessing of the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, the Knights launched what's called the Prussian Crusade. By the end of the 1200s, they had defeated the Prussians, forced them to accept Christianity, and expanded their own power in the region. Once that was done, they turned their attention to Lithuania, which was still pagan. For about 100 years, they launched raids into Lithuanian lands, burning villages and taking captives. Their main focus was Samogitia, because this land sat right between their holdings in Prussia and their lands further north in Livonia. Controlling Samogitia would have connected their territories and made their state much stronger. At one point in the 1380s, Lithuania was torn apart by civil war, and as part of the struggles, Samogitia was even handed over to the Knights for a short time. But things changed dramatically in 1385 with the Union of Krava. Jogaila, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, agreed to marry Queen Jadwiga of Poland. He converted to Christianity and was crowned King of Poland, uniting the two countries under one crown. This personal union between Poland and Lithuania was a huge shift in power. It also destroyed the main excuse the Teutonic Knights had used for centuries, fighting pagans. Since Lithuania was now officially Christian, the Knights had no real religious reason to keep attacking. But they didn't give up. They said Jogaila's conversion wasn't genuine, and even took the case to the Pope. At the same time, they held on to Samogitia since 1404, while Poland had its own disputes with them over Dobrzen land and the important port city of Gdansk. Trade also added fuel to the fire, because the Knights controlled the lower parts of 3 big rivers, the Niemen, the Vistula, and the Daugava, making it harder for Poland and Lithuania to grow their economies. By 1409, everything was heating up again. The people of Samogitia rose up against the Knights, with support from Lithuania. The Knights responded with threats of invasion. Poland then declared it would back Lithuania, and tension grew even more. On August 6, 1409, Ulrich von Jungingen, the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order, declared war. The knights moved quickly, invading Greater Poland and Kuyavia, burning castles, taking the town of Bydgoszcz, and raiding the countryside. The Polish forces hit back, retaking some towns, while the Samogitians attacked Memel. But because both sides weren't yet prepared for a long and bloody war, they agreed to another truce in October. Instead of resting though, both sides spent the truce preparing for a huge clash. The knights paid off allies like Sigismund of Hungary to try to win more support, while Jogaila and Vytautas, the leader of Lithuania, carefully planned to merge their armies into one giant force. Their goal was nothing less than to march directly on the knights' main fortress at Marienburg. In the summer of 1410, the plan was put into action. The Polish and Lithuanian armies met up at Cherwinsk, built a floating bridge across the Vistula River, and crossed it together. This was no small feat. It took days of careful work and coordination between soldiers from many different lands. Masovian troops joined them, and the huge army pushed deep into the knights' land. Ulrich von Jungingen expected separate attacks, one Polish and one Lithuanian, but he was wrong. Instead, the forces combined into one massive army. On July 15, 1410, both sides finally clashed near the villages of Grunwald and Tannenberg. The Battle of Grunwald was one of the largest in medieval Europe. The Polish-Lithuanian army may have had as many as 30 or even 40,000 men, while the Teutonic Knights had at least 20,000. The diversity of the Polish-Lithuanian army was remarkable. Catholic Poles fought shoulder to shoulder with pagan Samogitians, Orthodox Ruthenians, and even Muslim Tatars from the steppes. The knight side had warriors from many different European lands, drawn by the idea of fighting in a crusade. Before the battle began, the knights tried to insult Jogaila and Vytautas by sending them 2 swords, daring them to fight. The Lithuanians struck first. After heavy fighting, they suddenly retreated, which some historians believe was a trick. The Poles then fought fiercely against the knights. At one point, a knight almost reached King Jogaila himself, but he was saved at the last moment by his secretary, Zbigniew Olszyński. Then the Lithuanians returned, and when Ulrich von Jungingen personally tried to break through the lines, he was killed. Once their leader fell, the Teutonic Knights broke apart, their camp was overrun, and thousands were killed or captured. The defeat was devastating. Around 8,000 knights were killed, and about 14,000 were taken prisoner. Most of their top leaders were dead. But strangely, the Polish and Lithuanian forces didn't rush to capture Marienburg. They stayed on the battlefield for days, then advanced slowly. This gave Heinrich von Plauen, one of the knights' commanders, just enough time to fortify the capital. By the time Jogaila's army reached the fortress at the end of July, it was too strong to storm. Some historians think Jogaila may have wanted to avoid completely destroying the order, since wiping them out might upset the balance of power in the region. The siege dragged on, with disease spreading and supplies running low. By September, the siege was abandoned, and the knights even managed to retake much of the territory they had lost. Still, fighting didn't completely stop. In October 1410, Jogaila's army won another important clash at Koronowo. After more small battles, both sides realized they couldn't keep fighting forever. So in February 1411, they signed the Peace of Thorn. Under the terms, Poland regained Dobrzyn land, Lithuania kept Samogitia for as long as Jogaila and Vytautas lived, and the Teutonic Knights had to pay enormous reparations. These payments were crushing. To raise the money, the knights borrowed heavily, taxed their people more than ever, and even took silver and gold from churches. The people rebelled in cities like Gdansk and Torun. Over the years, the knights became weaker and weaker, relying on expensive mercenaries instead of loyal followers, and their power steadily declined.